Walsh here. The FBI has launched another investigation into the Clinton Foundation. Good. I want to know. You want to know. We'll talk about it when Freedom returns at 5.
Good morning, Dan and Amy. So the Michael Wolff book, Fire and Fury.
It's pretty juicy.
It's spent, it's dominated the Beltway back and forth for the last 4 or 5 days. It certainly dominated the Sunday talkies with all the pundits trying to identify whether there's any significance to the Fire and Fury. And questions about Michael Wolff's the journalistic standards that Michael Wolff used to, as well as the accuracy of portions of the book. Sean Spicer has challenged.
Spicy.
Spicy's back. He's
Spicy.
challenged some of the things that were described in the book that he has firsthand knowledge of, as well as items attributed to him, statements attributed to him.
I think when you get up at that podium, your goal is to tell the media and the American people the best information you have at the time. Mm-hmm. There's no question that sometimes that information changed as facts became available to us. But at no time did I go up and say something that was, as you put it, demonstrably false intentionally. There were times when facts became available to us later throughout a scenario or an event, and we went up. And to the best of my ability, when I did screw up or I didn't have all the facts, I'd say, hey, we've got further details that have come out. But I think there was an intensity and a scrutiny that has never been seen before.
Okay, well, that wasn't it. But he goes on to say that there were inaccuracies in the book, things that didn't happen, things that weren't said. And he specifically highlights Melania allegedly crying on election night that Trump had won because she didn't want him to win.
But the idea that, Melania Trump was the one who encouraged President Trump to run for office. She was very supportive of this. The idea that she was crying is nonsense. She's been very supportive of her president, of the president, of his agenda, and of him personally.
Now others.
Oh, that's completely different than what I read.
And this is not a isolated case. There are
They've
others.
been tears for joy. Or tears of joy?
Well, that's essentially what he's saying. Tom Barrack, who's a friend of Trump's, longtime friend of Trump, says that his quote, a derogatory quote in the book about Trump, is something he never said. So there are many of these things. Chuck Todd pointed out in Meet the Press there are a lot of factual inaccuracies, things that are easy to fact check. Sarah Sanders made the same point, like the age of people in the book, the age of people that are referenced in the book that are incorrect, apparently, in some instances.
Yeah, it seems like it was a little rushed to print.
But
because there are grammatical errors too. If you read, I read some excerpts and thought,
But this is, of course, fodder for those who think Trump is mentally unfit for the job to prosecute their case, both on the left, of course. Michael Wolff making the pronouncement over the weekend that this book is going to end Trump's presidency, and also those on the center right, the never Trumpers on the center right, like former McCain top aide Steve Schmidt.
What we see increasingly is a president who is under pressure, out of his depth, ignorant, unprepared, and fundamentally unfit for the office. And this is apparent to everybody. It's apparent to the members of Congress, but they don't say it publicly. They say it to journalists. They say it privately in the bars. But his dangerous unfitness, I think, is something that out of this book and these other actions on the third day of the new year are increasingly going to become part of the political narrative in 2018, because though it may be uncomfortable, it's increasingly clear that the question of this president's manifest unfitness for this office is no longer something that we can avoid discussing for the sake of politeness.
Well, let's continue to discuss it, because our next guest, Ronald Kessler,
actually interviewed the president.
Yeah.
He has a book coming out in April.
He's at some one-on-one time. The forthcoming book, Ronald Kessler's book, best-selling author, is Inside the Trump White House. You know Ronald Kessler from previous books he's penned on the Secret Service, the FBI, CIA, the Secret Service detailing with various presidents and so forth. We've talked to him about before. We're pleased to be joined again by Ronald Kessler. Ronald, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Hey, great to be back with you.
So your one-on-one time with the president, since the order of the day is to question his mental stability and acuity, and him to respond that he's a stable genius, what was your impression of the president from your time with him?
Well, I just interviewed him last weekend. The night before New Year's Eve at Mar-a-Lago, and he was perfectly normal. I've known him for 2 decades since I did a book on Palm Beach and flew down with him to Mar-a-Lago with my wife Pam. And but so much in this book is so obviously untrue. Anybody who watches any interview with him on TV or knows anything about how the campaign unfolded knows that most of it is fabrication. The idea that he didn't want to run, even though he was campaigning 24 hours a day, the idea that Melania didn't want him to run when in fact she urged him to run, that she was crying on inauguration day and on the night that he won, just totally absurd. The fact that anybody's taken this seriously is a really sad commentary on our journalistic standards and political life.
Well, apparently Steve Bannon's the one who let the fox into the hen house with letting Michael Wolff in. But he has since apologized yesterday, issued an apology and saying that the comments that he made were geared toward Paul Manafort and not Donald Trump Jr.
Oh, that's just absurd. I mean, obviously, his comments were about Trump. His comments were about Don Jr. And I have what I consider to be a smoking gun on how Bannon has made things up, and that is Bannon, according to the book, thought that when Trump made his comments about Charlottesville and he was going back and forth about whether there were decent people on both sides, that he saw that as a sign that Trump was unfit for office and could be removed under the 25th Amendment for mental impairment. Well, it so happens that I was interviewing Bannon at the very time, right in the middle of the controversy, in the old executive office building. The White House was being renovated, so he was in a temporary office. And he was gleeful about Trump's comments and told me that he talked with Trump twice during that period and urged him on and said, if you apologize or you retract anything or try to revise anything, the press will just jump on you and say it's too little or too late. So, this book is just full of lies. When I interviewed Trump last weekend, he told me that it's the only interview he's given for a book or will be giving for a book as president. My book, Inside the Trump White House, Changing the Rules of the Game, is coming out on April 3rd, and it will be the real, honest story. It will be an unvarnished story. It will not sugarcoat anything. It'll have a lot of inside juicy details, but at the same time, it will put everything in context, the tremendous success that Trump has achieved, both in foreign affairs and on the economy, how he actually operates, how he actually makes decisions, and I think it'll be quite revealing compared with this recent book.
Jonah Goldberg in National Review Online had a really ripped Bannon in his weekly roundup column. And Jonah Goldberg is no fan of Trump, writes, no one destroyed Bannon save Bannon himself. In an effort to fillet himself, he overshot the target, crammed his head up his own ass, and now finds himself confused and alone in a dark corner of his own making. I don't think you can get stronger than that, but that seems to be what you're saying about Bannon as he tries to do damage control in the form of a non-apology apology.
Yeah, it is sad because he is very smart, and contrary to the appearance or image that he projects of being this guy who says that darkness is good, and he goes around in some kind of combat jacket, he's actually very engaging and polite in person. It's funny, but he's totally gone off the deep end with these comments. He is certainly finished in the political world, and I say good riddance. So
over the course of the last 2 decades that you've known Donald Trump, is it? Let me ask it a different way. Is it the case that since you've known him for 20 years, his particular somewhat unique style of communicating, maybe you're a bit a nerd to, where the country is still getting used to, and so it's perceived differently because it's so jarringly stark in contrast to how politicians normally talk, particularly the
That's
president.
Right. You got it. He is an unorthodox president, just like his hero Jackson was, and he certainly does come up with these bizarre tweets from time to time, which do disturb people, understandably. But at the same time, he operates like a good CEO, and he doesn't know every detail of everything in the government, but he provides the strength and the overall direction to come up with policies that have resulted in this incredible stock market boom, part of which is psychological. People just feel he's not going to strangle them with regulations. He's not going to impose restrictions on business. CEOs feel they can expand and hire more workers. And then on the other end, on the foreign side, foreign leaders fear him in some respects. They don't know if he's going to go off the deep end. And so they respect him and they respect the country, and that's why you see so much progress in terms of China actually voting to impose sanctions on North Korea. You saw Trump launch missiles into Syria when they used chemical weapons. And ISIS has been almost totally destroyed because he took the handcuffs off the military. It's exactly what we need to, as he says, make America great again.
And I know that you're in with the, obviously, Secret Service, but do they appreciate President Trump? Does he treat them well? Does Melania treat them well?
Yeah, they both treat the Secret Service very well. They are respectful of the agents, and Barron also. I know I've been to Mar-a-Lago many times and seen how he deals with the Secret Service. Unlike Jenna and Barbara Bush, who would try to lose their agents, he's very considerate. So was Obama and Michelle, by the way. In terms of being fair.
Does anybody that you spoke with for the purposes of your forthcoming book, any of those individuals you spoke with beyond the president, did they express any concerns about his mental stability or acuity?
No, this is a total fabrication by Michael Wolff. They certainly don't like it when he blows up at them. He does have that tendency, but beyond that, nothing to indicate any problem whatsoever. And again, you just watch an interview with him on TV. He's on top of things and on top of policy. That's all you need to know.
All right. He is Ronald Kessler, New York Times bestselling author of books on the Secret Service, FBI, CIA. His new book, Inside the Trump White House, includes these one-on-one conversations with President Trump that he was just describing, released April 3rd, Inside the Trump White House, author Ronald Kessler. Thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
It's news, opinion, insight. This is Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer.